My mother canceled my overseas flight for my dream job. You're staying to care for us, she insisted. My brother sneered, yeah, who else will buy my new car? I stayed quiet and walked away. They thought they'd won until the eviction notice appeared on our door. Can you imagine losing the love of your life, only to have the last tangible piece of him stolen by your own family? My mom sold my engagement ring, the one my late fiancé designed just for me, and said, with a sip of coffee, oh, that? Callista needed money for Bali. They thought it was the end of the story. They were wrong. What would you have done if the people who were supposed to protect you treated you like you didn't matter at all? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Friday mornings usually held a quiet tension in our house. Denver was finally starting to thaw, soft rays of sun just barely slipping past the blinds. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, still wearing one sock, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had clung to me all week. It was Everett's anniversary. 2 years to the day. 2 years since my world just folded in on itself. The raw, gut-wrenching sobs of that first spring had quieted, but grief still lived inside me, a silent, sharp companion. I reached for the second drawer of my nightstand, where the velvet box always rested. Always. It was pure muscle memory, the same angle, the same soft click of wood sliding open. Except this time, there was no box. I blinked. Then, with a growing dread, I pulled the drawer wider, checking every corner, lifting old receipts and a forgotten candle wick. Nothing. No box. Not even the little velvet cloth that came with it. A cold certainty settled in my chest. It wasn't a mistake. My heart tightened, not in panic yet, but with a strange, stinging cold. Still in one sock, I walked down the stairs, my hand gripping the banister far too tight. Mom was in the kitchen, flipping through a magazine, sipping her coffee like it was just any other Friday. Morning, she said, without even looking up. Mom, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you know where my ring is? She turned a page. What ring? I clenched my jaw. The ring. Everett's ring. The one he gave me. Oh, she said, blinking slowly, as if I'd asked about a carton of expired milk. That? We sold it. The silence that followed was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. You, what? She stirred her coffee, glancing vaguely towards the window. Callista needed help for her Bali retreat. You know, spiritual stuff. And you weren't wearing the ring anymore anyway. My dad's voice drifted in from the hallway, just as dismissive. You haven't touched it in months, Rowena. We figured you didn't need it. There he stood, arms folded, that familiar condescension in his eyes, like I'd failed some unspoken expectation again. I stared at them, every word I wanted to scream stuck somewhere between my ribs and my throat. You sold something that wasn't yours. Dad shrugged. Well, technically, no, I cut in, my voice finally finding its firmness. No. That ring was mine. Everett designed it with me. We chose the diamond together. He even had the band engraved inside. Mom rolled her eyes. Rowena, it's not like you're still getting married. She said it like a joke, like Everett had just stepped out for groceries, not collapsed in a diner parking lot waiting for me. Not left a voicemail saying he was bringing my favorite pie. He's dead. I snapped, the word catching in my throat. Not forgotten. Mom sighed, that exhausted look she always wore when my emotions were deemed too inconvenient. Callista's finding herself. That retreat is life-changing. Then maybe she should have sold something of hers, I whispered, barely audible. She doesn't have anything like that, Dad muttered. And you weren't using it. I stepped back, the entire world tilting on its axis. They hadn't just sold a ring. They'd sold the last piece of him I had left. I walked back up the stairs, each step heavy, purposeful. In my room, I opened the drawer again. Still empty. But this time, something caught my eye in the haze of my shock. Tucked gently in the very back, almost an afterthought, was the velvet cloth. Deep navy, embroidered with white daisies. Limp. Empty. I sank to the floor, the cloth in my lap. My fingers traced the stitches. Everett had said the daisies reminded him of our first road trip, how they bloomed wild across a field behind some dusty motel in Utah. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, listening to nothing but my own broken breath, feeling far too much. My voice came out low, steady, a strange calm. They didn't just sell a ring. They sold what's left of me. By Sunday night, I hadn't left my room. Barely eaten, just water and stale crackers, whatever silence would let me keep down. My phone had been off since Friday. I was terrified of it. Terrified of a text from Mom telling me to be more understanding, or worse, from Callista, pretending not to know a thing. But eventually, I turned it on. Not because I was ready, but because I was tired of hiding. The screen lit up, and what I saw made my stomach twist. There she was. Callista. On a glossy wooden yoga deck in Ubud, sunlight behind her, a garland of flowers around her neck. Arms lifted in that perfectly rehearsed surrender to the universe pose she'd practiced since she was 16 and bored in Sunday school. The caption read, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey." A heart emoji. A lotus. The comments flooded in, "You inspire me. Such a brave soul. She's glowing like actual light." I stared until my hand trembled. I couldn't even cry. That was the scary part. It was like my grief had nowhere left to go. She was using his ring money to post about her rebirth. I scrolled, and it got worse. She was tagged in stories, reposted by yoga brands, even featured in a wellness blog, From Pain to Power, Callista Blaz's transformational journey. A paragraph about overcoming generational dysfunction, another about choosing the hard path of self-love. I almost laughed. I wasn't mentioned once. Not a single line. No one knew that while she was stretching into the sunset, I had been sleeping on the floor of my childhood bedroom because my parents gave away the bed I bought after Everett died. Too big for one person anyway, they'd said. Flashes of growing up with Callista filled my mind. The tantrums, the slammed doors, Mom always sighing and turning to me, "You're the strong one, Rowena. Help me keep the peace." A job I never applied for, a job I never got to quit. Everett used to tell me, "You don't always have to be the one holding the house together while it burns." But I guess I didn't hold it well enough, because now they were dancing in the flames, and I was the ashes. Around 8:30, I finally dressed and drove to the cemetery. The wind had picked up, and the gate creaked like a ghost as I pushed it open. I walked the narrow path to Everett's stone. I didn't kneel. I just stood there. "They used your ring, Everett," I whispered, the words ragged. "They sold it so she could post gratitude quotes in Bali." The wind rustled the dried leaves at my feet, and something inside me cracked a little more. Back home, I scrolled again. Callista's latest post, nearly 2,000 likes. A drone shot over rice fields. She was mid-spin, arms outstretched. Caption, "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." I didn't think. I typed, "Hope the healing was worth it." I paid for it. I hit send before shame could catch up. 10 minutes later, it was gone. Deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mom, "Rowena, let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they called it. Not erasure. Not betrayal. Drama. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until the words blurred, then scrolled back up to Callista's smiling face. People think grief is loud. Wailing, sobbing, storming out. But it's not. It's being erased slowly while the world claps for the person holding the eraser. I wasn't trying to start drama. I just didn't want to disappear. But in this family, existing outside their script was rebellion. 3 days later, that comment had vanished. Just like me, it seemed. I sat at the old kitchen table, the same one I'd eaten cereal at since I was 7. A small, neat folder lay in front of me. Inside, partial receipts for the ring, Everett's old email confirming the appraisal, and a heartfelt note from his parents, thanking me for caring for the ring until it became part of your new chapter together. I pushed the folder across the table to my father. He didn't even touch it. You keep going like this, he said, not looking up from his newspaper, and you'll ruin your own peace. We can't undo what's done. He stirred his coffee, as if that was the only thing that mattered. But you can at least acknowledge what it was, I said, trying not to shake. He sighed, folded the paper, and finally looked at me. Rowena, you've been living here 2 years rent-free. We've given you more than enough. It's just a ring. Then he slid something across the table. A thin, white envelope with a gold-embossed letterhead. The moment I saw the law firm's name, my stomach flipped. I opened it slowly. Inside was a formal note. This correspondence confirms that all contents within the property at our address fall under legal ownership of Vera and Jean Blaze. I stopped reading. They didn't just want the ring. They wanted me to know that nothing here belonged to me. Later that day, the sky outside hung heavy and gray, the kind of color that makes your bones ache. I drifted into the garage, not knowing why. Maybe I just needed to breathe air that hadn't passed through their mouths. I sat on a crate labeled Rowena College, brushing off dust. Inside were old yearbooks, a guitar strap, and beneath it, a small, sealed envelope. My name on the front, in Everett's careful, unmistakable handwriting. I'd never opened it. My hands shook a little. Inside was just a sticky note, faded but intact. Don't let them take your voice or your worth. I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't just a note. It was a gut punch from someone who always saw me. Even when I didn't know I was vanishing. I slipped it into my wallet, folded behind my driver's license, behind the version of me the world could see. That night, dinner was predictable: meatloaf, green beans, and erasure, served hot. Mom raised a glass midway through the meal. Here's to Callista. Her growth, her healing, her courage. What a transformation! I sat still. No one looked my way. Not even a glance to see if the other daughter was breathing. I lifted my glass halfway, then lowered it and stood. I'll be upstairs, I said. My dad muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, that girl needs perspective. I didn't answer. In my room, I pulled a plastic storage bin from under my bed. Bills, receipts, insurance forms, email printouts, statements from my joint account with Everett. Things I hadn't looked at in a year. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something that wasn't theirs. Something that reminded me I used to have a life, a love, and a voice. The scanner beeped quietly as I fed in page after page. I created folders. I labeled timelines. Somewhere along the way, I stopped crying. Stopped asking for acknowledgement. Something inside shifted from wanting to be heard to refusing to be silenced. They'd taken the ring, but they hadn't taken the truth. Not yet. I just knew I needed something that was mine. By Thursday night, the pile of documents on my desk had doubled. Receipts, bank transfers, insurance forms. Each one scanned, labeled, and stored in a folder marked truth. There was no master plan, no legal motion drafted, just me, pulling string after string together before someone else could yank them from my hands. Rain tapped against the windows, soft but steady, blurring everything outside, much like things felt inside me. I was highlighting a paragraph from Everett's old email when I accidentally brushed the trackpad. An old browser tab opened. One I must have left bookmarked a year ago. It was a podcast. Autoplay kicked in. And then I heard her voice. Healing begins when we decide to release the roles other people force us into. Callista. I froze. My hand hovered midair, caught between closing the window and needing to hear every single word. The host chimed in, "That's so powerful, Callista. Can you give us an example of that release?" There was a pause, a sip of something. "Well," she began, "I had to separate myself from the grief in our family. Some people, they cling to pain like it's a personality." Every muscle in my body locked. I couldn't even blink. She was talking about me. I listened on. I walked away. It cost me so much, but I chose joy. I gave up everything. Even objects tied to trauma. You can't move forward while dragging symbols of emotional debt. I mean, rings. They're just objects soaked in pain. I don't remember hitting pause. I just remember staring at the screen, my reflection in the dark monitor staring back like it didn't recognize me anymore. 50,000 listens. 50,000 people heard my story twisted, repackaged, and sold back as her brand. She turned Everett's ring into a metaphor for toxicity. My grief, our love, reduced to clickbait. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I just sat there. My fingers hovered, then moved slowly. I downloaded the episode, saved it into my folder. Then I opened a new document. Title, Timeline of Misuse. That night, the file grew steadily. My breath, the only sound in the room, apart from the soft rain, and betrayal. Around 10, I grabbed my coat and keys. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just needed to scan a few more things, Everett's letters, mostly. The local coffee shop had a late-night scanner. I drove in silence, the wipers setting a slow, steady rhythm. At the coffee shop, the barista just nodded. I ordered a black tea and found a corner. One by one, I slid his letters into the machine, his handwriting growing shakier in the later ones. Each scan made the truth heavier, not lighter. "I love how you see people," one line read. "Even when they've forgotten how to see you." I pressed my hand over that page. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to be rewritten. By the time I returned home, it was close to midnight. I changed into an old sweatshirt, pulled my hair into a knot, and sat cross-legged on the floor by my desk. In the drawer beside me, folded carefully, still clean after all these years, was the velvet cloth. The one with the white daisies. The one that once held the ring. I took the USB drive where I'd saved the podcast and wrapped it in the cloth. Some things you wrap not to protect, but to remember. I placed it gently in my purse, zipped the top, and let it sit there like an anchor. I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't breaking anymore. I was collecting. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally remembering I'd been right. Friday evening settled over the house like a wet coat. Heavy, damp, unwelcome. My parents were out. I stayed upstairs, door half cracked, laptop shut. My body ached from sitting too long, but I couldn't bring myself to lie down. I needed something, anything, to remind me this house hadn't always felt like a prison. I dug out an old bin from the back of my closet, the kind with brittle plastic edges. It held what was left of a girl I barely remembered. CDs, birthday cards, faded Polaroids, and a stack of mini DV tapes. I hadn't seen them in years. I plugged in the little camcorder, sifted through the tapes, and picked one, Rope's 6th birthday. The screen lit up. Static buzzed, then muted, jittery color. There I was, a little girl in a yellow sundress, beside a chocolate cake with 6 lit candles. My smile was wide. I remembered that dress. I'd begged Mom for it, said it made me feel like sunshine. Then Callista appeared on screen, 8 years old and already taller. Without warning, she shoved my head into the cake. I flinched, both on the tape and on the floor. The camera shook with laughter. My parents' voices joined in. "Callista! Oh my God!" Mom said, laughing more than scolding. Little me wiped frosting from my eyelashes, looking around for help. But no one moved. The clip ended. I paused the video, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. I sat still, tasting that same bitter silence I must have swallowed that day. I whispered to the empty room, maybe this is just how it's always going to be. The key turned in the front door downstairs. Heels on tile, the clink of keys in the bowl, then Mom's low murmur, probably saying goodnight to Dad. But instead of going to her room, she came upstairs. Light footsteps outside my door, then a knock. Before I could answer, she pushed the door open. No warning. No permission. She stood there, holding a small velvet box, navy blue, aged at the corners. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "I was cleaning out the closet," she said softly. "Found these. Nana had promised them to you, remember? Figured maybe now's a good time." She sat on the edge of my bed without asking. "Open the box." Inside, a pair of pearl drop earrings, delicate and familiar. I blinked, unsure what game we were playing. "She didn't mean to hurt you, sweetie," Mom said, smoothing her skirt. "Callista just handles things differently. And we thought you'd moved on from all that." All that. Like grief was a shoebox to be tucked under a bed and forgotten. The earrings gleamed in the low light, clean and cold. I almost reached for them. I almost let the warmth of nostalgia dull the sharpness inside me. I almost said thank you. I almost forgave her. But then a buzz. My phone lit up on the desk. A message from Liana, a college friend, "Thought you should see this." I tapped the link. It was an Instagram story. Callista again, sitting cross-legged on a patio somewhere tropical. A pale smoothie in hand. Perfect lighting. Her voice, syrup-sweet, "Forgiveness is so powerful. Even when people lash out, I know it's just their pain talking." I rise above. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. That was about me. About the deleted comment, the velvet cloth, the ring, the earrings. Every inch of my restraint being used as ammunition against me, repackaged as her saintly patience. The wave of humiliation hit fast, like a slap I should have seen coming. Mom left not long after, telling me to get some rest. I said nothing, just nodded. The door clicked shut. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed. The house returned to quiet. But something in me wasn't quiet anymore. I opened my laptop. The folder marked Truth waited like an open mouth. I added the screenshot of Callista's story. Then I retrieved Nana's inheritance letter, the one that listed my name beside the word earrings. I scanned it. Slowly, I opened my phone's recorder. I spoke into the dark. "I'm not doing this to expose them. I'm doing this so I never forget again who they really are." Then I wrapped the earrings in a separate cloth and slid them into the drawer. Not to use, not to wear. Just to remember. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern I'd been trained to forgive. But that morning, something shifted. I woke up before the sun was fully over the rooftops, the house blanketed in that muffled quiet only cloudy mornings bring. I didn't wait for coffee, didn't scroll. I opened my closet, found the navy blazer I hadn't touched since Everett's memorial, and slipped it on over a clean button-down. The sleeves were slightly looser now, but it still fit. Standing in the mirror, I didn't look like someone who had anything to prove. Just someone who was finished waiting. The velvet cloth sat on my nightstand, folded carefully around the flash drive. Inside it, receipts, scanned letters, a copy of Nana's will, the podcast audio, screenshots of Callista's posts, and my voice recording. I placed the whole thing inside a clear envelope, slid it into a folio, and zipped it shut. I didn't leave a note. Didn't text anyone. I walked out the front door like I was heading to a dentist appointment. No tension, no fire. Just clean air and purpose. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a co-working space. Ethan, the soft-spoken manager, handed me a keycard. I appreciated that he didn't make small talk. I took a corner table by the window. Light rain tapped against the glass. My laptop hummed as I opened the legal document templates Everett's estate lawyers had shared with me, just in case. I filled in the blanks with cold clarity. Item 1, 4.1 carat ring, purchased jointly with Everett 3 months before his passing. Property held in trust until marriage. Therefore, sole ownership defaulted to surviving party, me. I cross-referenced every entry with dated email threads, photo timestamps, and the notarized letter Everett's mother had sent, confirming their family's intent for me to keep the ring. I added an affidavit describing the events around the sale and the psychological harm caused. At exactly 10:42 a.m., I clicked send. The documents went to Fisher & LSLP, the firm that handled Everett's affairs, addressed to Samantha Mira, a partner I remembered for her no-nonsense warmth. I sat back. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just still. I didn't cry. Didn't shake. I closed my laptop and leaned into the back of the chair, letting the rain blur the edges of the moment. My ceramic cup of coffee sat untouched. I finally lifted it to my lips. It had gone cold, but it was mine. Later that afternoon, I stayed in the space. I opened another folder. This one had nothing to do with my family, at least not directly. It was for the Reclaiming What Was Always Yours initiative, an annual women's leadership gala I'd been quietly funding in Everett's memory since last fall. He'd always said legacy didn't need a name, just a ripple. A light switched on in the dark for someone else. The event was next week at the Meadowbrook Center. The floral arrangements, speaker stipends, even the customized signage, all paid for under a foundation name I'd created discreetly. I double-checked the PowerPoint slides. One of them was a photo from years ago, Everett and I volunteering at a career panel for single mothers. He'd stayed an hour after just to help a woman fix her resume. That slide would close the night. Just above it, in small print, in honor of those who give quietly. I sent the final slide deck to the event coordinator. As I packed up, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You got mail. Looks like a gala invite. Callista got one, too. I think they want her to speak. How wonderful. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I laughed. Just once. Soft. Dry. Like the punchline of a joke only I got. I didn't reply. Didn't respond at all. I didn't need to be on the stage. I'd already built the microphone. Let them walk into the spotlight. They didn't know who lit it. I arrived just before sunset. The hotel's event space shimmered with soft candlelight and glass bowls filled with floating white daisies. My own touch. Vera would have chosen roses, red, or nothing. But this night wasn't hers to curate. I checked in quietly at the front desk. No name tags, no fuss. The coordinator handed me a folded program, her eyes polite, unrecognizing. Perfect. Across the room, I saw Callista glide through the main doors in a custom white gown. Her hair pinned up in deliberate waves. Vera walked beside her, arm in arm, whispering praise like she was coaching a pageant queen. You deserve this, darling, she said, just loud enough for anyone near the champagne table to overhear. I stood alone in the corner for a while. Not hidden. Just unbothered. My black dress was simple. No sparkle. No statement. Just presence. My clutch was tucked close against my ribs. The velvet cloth, folded neatly inside, pressed against the envelope I hadn't let out of my sight all week. The music softened. The host stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone. Dinner plates were cleared. Wine refilled. Then, the surprise guest speaker was announced. Callista took the microphone with practiced poise. Even her footsteps sounded rehearsed. I could almost hear Vera inhale like a proud director behind the curtain. Grief, Callista began, her voice a soft lament, is a journey. But some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off. My fingers tensed around the edges of my clutch. She continued, tonight, I want to talk about letting go. About choosing not to be defined by what hurt you, but by what you did with the pain. She never once said my name, but I was in every sentence. A shadow standing behind her words. I had to release things that tied me to darkness, she said, smiling with what I knew was soft, performative grief. Objects. Expectations. Even family wounds. I chose light. The audience nodded, a few murmuring like they were at a sermon. I moved slowly toward the event coordinator at the edge of the room. Her headset perched over one ear, checking the screen cue. Excuse me, I said quietly, offering the sealed envelope. This is a featured donor message. It needs to be played now, before the final speaker. She blinked, uncertain. I wasn't told. It was requested ahead, I said, my voice calm, unwavering. Check the card inside. She opened it, read a few lines. Her brow furrowed, then lifted. Yes. Okay, I'll cue it up. I returned to my corner. Callista was still on stage, thanking the organizers, the city, the brave women here tonight who've overcome so much. The applause began before she even finished. And then it stopped. The house lights dimmed slightly. The screen behind the stage flickered to black. White text faded in memory of Everett Langford Blaze. A hush fell. The video opened on me, sitting in a quiet room, speaking directly into the lens. My name is Rowena Blaze. I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered, and I lost it. I watched from the back as heads turned. Some recognized me for the first time. 2 years ago, I buried my fiancé. We had picked out a ring together, a symbol of our future. It was taken. Sold. The money was used for someone else's journey without my knowledge. That ring didn't just represent a promise. It held grief, memory, and love. The screen shifted to a photo, Everett smiling, me beside him, holding his hand. I funded this gala quietly, in his name. The theme, reclaiming what was always yours, wasn't just about leadership. It was about memory and truth. There was no anger in my voice, only clarity. Sometimes, I said, in the final frame, the ones who suffer most are expected to stay silent so the loudest can heal. The screen faded to black. The room didn't exhale. It simply froze. Vera's hand flew to her mouth, like she'd been slapped. Callista, still near the stage, had frozen mid-pose. A photographer's flash went off, catching her face twisted between confusion and fear. I didn't wait to hear what was said. As I walked to the door, I heard a whisper behind me. She paid for this. Then another. That was her fiancé. I didn't look back. Didn't pause for applause. I stepped into the night air, letting the cold remind me I wasn't invisible. I just wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't need applause. I needed them to hear the truth in a room that couldn't look away. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I hadn't even opened my eyes, but I could feel it pulsing on the nightstand, warning me. I rolled over. 38 unread messages, 12 missed calls. Notifications stacked on every app like digital ash from a fire I'd quietly lit. I opened Instagram. Callista's face filled the first story tile. She was crying dramatically, artfully. I was ambushed, her voice cracked. Last night should have been a celebration of healing, not an attack. My sister took something beautiful and turned it into a vendetta. A caption beneath a clip of her dabbing her eyes with a tissue read, "She's weaponizing grief." Another clip, her face turned slightly away from the camera, as if she didn't know it was still recording. I tried so hard to include her, but sometimes family can be your worst enemy. Comments flooded in, "Wow, this is so sad. She needs to get help. Your sister sounds toxic." By the time I opened Twitter, 2 local blogs had picked up her version, "Resilience Coach Faces Family Sabotage at Women's Gala." It was all so fast, so calculated. A text came through from Vera, "You've broken this family apart. Are you happy now?" Followed by a missed call from my father. No message, just a digital silence that said enough. I blocked them both. Then came a message from Ethan, the co-working space manager. He'd known Everett. Known me, long before I got used to swallowing my voice. "Don't let them own the final word. You've come too far to be pushed back into the dark." That was enough to get me out of bed. I threw on jeans and a plain navy sweater. No makeup, no earrings. Just the velvet cloth, folded neatly into my jacket pocket, and a transcript I'd printed that morning. A kind of truth I didn't need to shout, but wasn't going to hide either. The drive to the family house was short. I knew the turns by muscle memory, even though the place hadn't felt like home in years. The front door was cracked open, as if it had expected me. Callista was pacing in the living room, hair up in a knot, phone clutched in one hand. Her voice came in strained rehearsals, practicing damage control out loud. Something about emotional abuse. Something about her journey. She froze when she saw me. "You shouldn't be here," she snapped, voice tight, but her hands trembled. "I won't be long," I said, stepping inside, calm. I walked to the coffee table and set down the transcript. The paper sat heavy despite how thin it was. Her eyes darted to it. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I just gently unfolded the velvet cloth, empty now. Just a soft square of memory. I placed it beneath the transcript. "It's your voice," I said, "from the podcast. The one where you called me a grief addict." Callista's face drained of color. "You don't understand how media works." "I understand how truth works." She stared at me, lips slightly parted, but nothing came out. I stood there for a second longer, letting the silence hold. Then I turned. Vera stepped into the hallway just as I reached the door. Her eyes were wide, like she'd just woken up to a reality she didn't choose. "We're family, Rowena," she said, a faint tremble in her voice. "Blood?" I stopped, not out of hesitation, but clarity. Blood means nothing without respect. "I'm not here to belong anymore," I said. "I'm here to break the cycle." She didn't respond, just stood there like she couldn't find her script. I walked past her without flinching, out into the cool air. The sky had started to clear slightly, just enough to let in a thin band of light. The kind of light you have to look for. I slipped the velvet cloth back into my pocket. It felt different now. Clean. Done. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I finally loved myself more. The morning light in Napa was different. Softer, somehow. Less accusatory. It didn't pierce. It warmed. A breeze rolled gently off the vineyards as I turned the key in the lock of my new studio door. The sign above the entrance caught the light just enough to shimmer, Langford and Blaze, crafted with memory. I stepped inside and flipped the lights on. The space wasn't large, but it felt expansive in a way the old Blaze family house never had. Wood floors, brass fixtures, a row of workbenches facing wide windows that framed the hills like an oil painting. The walls were painted a gentle cream, and my tools were lined in silent order: pliers, molds, a flame torch, tumblers. I hadn't realized how much I missed the smell of metal warming under heat. It was something between hope and finality. That first week, foot traffic came in steady. A young couple from San Francisco, looking for wedding bands with soul. A woman in her 70s, asking if I could set a locket into a ring so she could carry her husband's photo, not just his memory. Then there were the quiet ones, locals who didn't say much, only looked around, and then whispered, "You're the one from the gala, right?" I'd nod, smile, nothing more. On one shelf in the back corner, under a soft spotlight, was a glass case. Inside, folded perfectly in half, was a familiar velvet cloth. Framed beneath it, a handwritten note: "This piece is not for sale." It cost everything to make. Beneath the cloth rested a band, diamond and steel, seamless in its fusion, etched along the edge, one delicate daisy. Not ornamental. Not flashy. Just quiet and certain. One afternoon, a little girl wandered in with her parents. She pressed her nose to the glass and pointed. "Who made that one?" she asked. I crouched down beside her. "Someone who used to be silent," I said. She turned to me, her brows scrunched. "Are they better now?" I smiled, real and soft. "She's still learning, but she's not silent anymore." Weeks passed without a word from Vera or Callista. No calls, no texts. That was its own answer. Then one Saturday, I received a short message from an old family friend, Lorraine. I hadn't spoken to her since college. "Saw your tribute at the gala. Your mom never said anything, but she kept the video on her desktop." I read the message twice. Then I let it sit. I didn't reply. Didn't forward it to anyone. Just let it be. Sometimes an apology doesn't come with words. But it doesn't mean you wait your life to hear it. I walked over to the workbench and slit open the top drawer. Inside was the original receipt for the velvet box, yellowed from age. I placed it beside Everett's final note, the one that had lived in my wallet ever since: "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." Outside, the clouds had lifted. Sun spilled across the cobblestones. I walked up front, breathed in, and turned the sign to open. As the day went on, I melted silver, set stones, sketched a new line of pendants. But there was no rush. No frantic energy. Just motion. Quiet. Mine. In the background, an old folk song played on the stereo, low and grainy. I didn't know the lyrics, but the melody felt familiar, like something I'd heard before I was old enough to name it. I looked again at the cloth under the glass. It had once held a symbol of a future that never arrived. Now it held nothing. And that, in its own way, meant everything. I lost something that was supposed to last forever. Then I lost people who were never meant to leave. But in all that loss, I found something quieter and stronger: myself. And this time, no one gets to sell me. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own peace? How did you find your voice, or what helped you reclaim what was truly yours? Tell me your stories in the comments below.